Hey all, quick little demo of my latest little train project for my dad. These are some die-cast O-scale cars that Menards produces just about every year when they put their train stuff out in Christmas. I've gone through and added headlights, taillights, backup lights, running lights, stop lights, and emergency flashers. Oh, and turn signals. So, to demo this out a little bit, I have a standard Lionel transformer. Lionel and any of that vintage O-gauge systems are unique as they run off of AC instead of DC, which most HO and other trains run at. As you notice, I have the outputs of the transformer running over to this little card, which is nothing more than a couple switches and a barrier strip to hook everything up, and that runs over the car. The input on the car will run off of 8 to, I have to double check, but I think it's 8 to 30 volts, AC or DC. And the polarity on the input when I get to that does not matter. So if you're on a DC system and you flip the two wires, it'll still work just fine. So right now I have it sort of in demo mode with just the taillights running. And if I poke at the transformer real quick here, you can see we're at, let's see if I can get this at the lowest. There's about 9 volts AC. It's about as low as this transformer will go. Yeah, about 9 volts. And here's all the way up to almost 20 volts AC. Please double check or read the description in the Instructables for this guy to double check the voltage. I will double check that and put it in that description. So anyways, as you can see, voltage variation doesn't matter much to this guy. Anything below 9 volts, there's a lower cutoff. It's a little under 9 volts and the lights will start to flicker a little bit. So just be warned. But 90% of the train stuff out there is above 9 volts, so it shouldn't be an issue. Especially if you put it on the accessory side of the transformer, which is recommended since there's no need to vary the voltage to it. So back to the lights. So here you can see the running lights on, and you got all the turn signals lit up, as you can see there. Hopefully you can see. Here, let me do this. So here, this should be a better view. There you can see all the running lights lit, which is the turn signal indicators and the tail lights at half brightness. Now, the car has the ability to have up to 4 inputs, which gives you 16 unique states. So you can have input 1, 2, 3, or 4 on, or then 1 and 2, 1 and 3, and so on and so forth, binary to all on. So these buttons are hooked up to the inputs, and I have different programs for each one. So here's the headlights, as you can see. And then there's one blinker, there's the other blinker, and also you can turn both on by going when you program it. I just don't have it hooked up to this setup right now. Here are the reverse lights and tail lights. As you note, there's the running lights and there's the tail lights. As you can see, they're much brighter, just like the real thing. And the third brake light is hooked up. And then finally, we have the emergency flashers. There's actually 2 LEDs in there. It's doing 2 blinks, and then back and forth like that forever. Now, for programming this, I said it was programmable. It's really quite straightforward. I'll show you when I turn the lights back on that one. But on the bottom, there's a button in this right here. I just made a little hole so you can access it with something pointy. And every time you push the button, it steps through all the various patterns, or all the combinations of lights. Now, if you happen to go past the one you want, like say I wanted that one, and oops, I went past, if you turn off the power right away, and turn it back on, it goes back to the state that it was previously. But if you change it and then let it sit for about a minute without interrupting power, and then interrupt power, the settings are saved. Nope, I didn't let it sit long enough. So let me do that again. So let's say we want that one. I will cut out here and then come back in about a minute. Okay, so it's been about a minute. I'm just going to turn power off, turn it back on, and as you can see, that state's saved. Now, there's multiple combinations. So the lighting is every combination. So every time you push the button, it just increments a counter, and then the first 7 bits of those counter, each bit controls one function, be it left turn, right turn, headlights, running lights, tail lights, so on and so forth. So to go all through all the combinations, it takes 128 button pushes. I arranged them hopefully in an intelligent manner where the emergency blinkers is the most significant bit, so it's the only one that's going to take forever to get to. But as I said, there's multiple inputs, so how do you program the other inputs? Well, all you got to do is get the input into that state and then push the same programming button. It just reprograms the state that's currently active. So I think that's everything I have to show on the working car. So let me stick this back in. And go through some other pieces. So here is one, hopefully you can see that, I have not finished assembly on. There's the control card, which I'll show you in a minute. And all these little wires here are magnet wire, and this is bifilament magnet wire. Not necessary to use, but it's kind of nice because then the 2 wires stay together and you don't have to worry about losing them. These wires run up behind the lights, and if you look in Instructable, there's details on how I built these, but there's basically a little chip LED right there with the 2 wires soldered onto it, one on each end, and then I ran them back here, embedded them in UV cure glue, and then glued everything back together to get these water clear lenses back on. So here's the little control card. Hopefully that focuses. So on this end you have your power input and then all your signal inputs. And over here is all the outputs to the LEDs. 12 unique channels. They're all wired the same except for the flasher channel. The flasher channel is a little unique as each pin can be controlled independently, and that's how I get the flashing back and forth. It's just the 2 LEDs are reverse polarity from each other. But anyways, there's 12, almost 13 channels, and these can be, with firmware updates, they can be programmed any way they want. Right now this guy is wired up as if you had a, quote, 3-wire trailer where the turn signals are separated from the stop signals. Now if you wanted to do a truck where it didn't have turn signals on it, where the brake lights were the turn signals, the code can be updated on this guy to do that instead of the independent turn signal markers. The control inputs, so what's currently running to these buttons, comes in these 4 wires. Now each one of these inputs has an opto isolator on it. What that means is there's 2 wires to each one, and long as you apply power to those 2 wires, independent of which one's common or which one's hot, that circuit activates. What this allows you to do is, in the case of Lionel, usually you isolate the outside track on one side, hook that to the accessory, and then when the train goes over, it grounds that rail to trip the accessory. On this guy, to do that, you just hook one of the 2 wires to an input to power, center or the center rail, depending on how your train's set up, and then hook the other wire to that isolated track, and you're done. And then in another case, some accessories are tripped by applying power instead of applying ground. On those, you just run one wire to the ground point somewhere in your thing and then apply power to the other pin through the switch, and it activates as well. It just gives you a lot of flexibility in how you can wire this up onto various train triggering devices. I think that's all I have. I'm working on getting the Instructables up now and uploading the latest latest schematics and Gerber data for the little control cards. Also, I may know someone who's interested in making them, so if you're interested in control cards, drop me a line. I will not be producing them, but I might be able to point you at someone who is. Well, that's all I got for this. Any questions, drop me a line, and I'll see you at the end of the next project.